So let's start reading through Matthew 2, 11 through 23. And I'm still sick, so you'll have to bear with me. Verse 11, after coming into the house, they saw the child with Mary his mother, and they fell to the ground and worshipped him. Then, opening their treasures, they presented to him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned by God in a dream not to return to Herod, the Magi left for their own country by another way. Now when they had gone, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream, and said, Get up, take the child and his mother, and flee to Egypt, and remain there until I tell you, for Herod is going to search for the child to destroy him. So Joseph got up and took the child and his mother while it was still night, and left for Egypt. He remained there until the death of Herod. This was to fulfill what had been spoken by the Lord through the prophet, Out of Egypt I called my son. Then, when Herod saw that he had been tricked by the Magi, he became very enraged, and sent and slew all the male children who were in Bethlehem and all its vicinity, from 2 years old and under, according to the time which he had determined from the Magi. Then what had been spoken through Jeremiah the prophet was fulfilled. A voice was heard in Ramah, weeping and great mourning, Rachel weeping for her children, as she refused to be comforted, because they were no more. But when Herod died, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared in a dream to Joseph in Egypt, and said, Get up, take the child and his mother, and go into the land of Israel, for those who sought the child's life are dead. So Joseph got up, took the child and his mother, and came into the land of Israel. But when he heard that Archelaus was reigning over Judea in place of his father Herod, he was afraid to go there. Then, after being warned by God in a dream, he left for the regions of Galilee, and came and lived in a city called Nazareth. This was to fulfill what was spoken through the prophets, He shall be called a Nazarene. Now, I'm going to go over all the facts here and things that most people kind of vaguely understand and don't really touch on. First of all, how old was Jesus? It doesn't say. We don't know the exact age. We can say from what the Magi did, or when they came and they told him about the star and they researched it, most people think it's 2 years. They say he was 2 years and under. I looked up the word in the Greek, and the word really was no help because it was both an infant and a toddler. So we don't know. Now, what did the stars say? If you remember last week, we looked at it. There was an event in the sky where Jupiter went over Regulus. That was not the Bethlehem star. If you see here, Matthew 2:2, it says, Where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we saw his star in the east, and we've come to worship him. So the first event that happened in 3 BC was just an event to get them to look. The next event was the actual star. They're not the same. It's not like this one came to this one and made something different. This was an event that stopped. Then this event happened, and this one was the bright star. So if you're going to base off of anything, you want to look at the second event in 2 BC. That happened in June 17th, June 17th, 2 BC. Now, they came to Jerusalem, asked Herod where he was, then ended up showing up there December 25th to worship him. If you look at the numbers, it doesn't make sense that he'd be 2 years old. It didn't take 2 years for them to get from Babylon to here. 2 years is too long to be watching the stars. They move. So you can watch over a period of days a movement of something, but not 2 years. It would be a 2 year cycle already passed through. So that wouldn't happen. Also, they were staying at the house still. What guest stays at the house for 2 years? Now, they could have had to have stayed for the census. They could have had to stay till Jesus was a little older to travel. But not 2 years. I mean, that's a really bad house guest. So I would assume he was 6 months old. Okay, so he's a young baby at this point. Now, you look at, I jumped ahead. Here we go. You look at the gifts that they brought. Matthew 2:11 indicates that they had 3 different kinds of gifts, but it didn't say how many. But we know the types of gifts they received. So they got gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Now you think coming to a baby shower, that's not the kind of gifts you're going to bring. All right? Now back then it would have been like, oh, thanks. Frankincense and myrrh. Each of these things that were given to the Lord were prophetic in nature. The gold represented his kingly authority. The frankincense was an expensive resin that was used in incense and perfumes. The priests used this in Israel for feast days. And incense was the symbol of the divine name. So there's a picture there. The gift that this represents here is his priestly and prophetic role, because Jesus is king and priest. So this is a picture of him being priest and prophetically his role. Myrrh was an expensive resin used as incense, perfume, and medicine, mostly used by the Egyptians in embalming people. If you look at Mark 15:23, here's the medicine side. They tried to give him a wine mixed with myrrh, but he did not take it. They would put myrrh in things to numb the pain, and he says, no, I have to go through the pain for you. He wouldn't take it. So myrrh represented the death our Lord would have to go through to take away the sins of the earth. Now, they didn't have any need for frankincense and myrrh. They needed the gold, but they didn't need frankincense and myrrh. So they would have been sold for a great deal of money, probably selling frankincense in Israel and myrrh in Egypt when they needed it. So they probably hung on to it. Now, they would have taken anything at this point over teddy bears and wooden blocks for their baby. Because, let's look here what biblical law says. When your child was born, you made an offering of a lamb or doves or pigeons. It says in Leviticus 12:8, but if she cannot afford a lamb, then she shall take 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons, one for the burnt offering and the other for the sin offering. Now, what did Jesus' parents offer for Jesus? Luke 2:23-24 says, Joseph and Mary took him to Jerusalem to present him to the Lord, as it is written in the law of the Lord. Every firstborn male is to be consecrated to the Lord, and to offer a sacrifice in keeping with what is said in the law of the Lord, a pair of doves or 2 young pigeons. They were poor. They were dirt poor. They were having issues. Not only were they having issues, they're staying with family right now, probably mooching off them. Maybe Joseph's trying to get some side jobs. They probably already had a carpenter in town. Now we're bringing another guy in who needs some money. Well, what do? The other guy already dominates that field there. And you get your own job someplace else. Okay? They needed some funds. The Magi, 6 months into this, brings everything they needed. Now let's see. This also worked for where they were going. We all know that they were going to Egypt. They needed money to get there. It still costs money back then or today to travel. It's not just grab your backpack and get on a donkey. You had to stay places. You had to eat food. They're not out there with a bow and arrow hunting. They needed money. So God gave them everything they needed to get to Egypt, to stay there and get back. It says Herod was troubled. Last week we saw in Matthew 2:2-3, that the Magi went to King Herod to inquire about the newborn king. And it says, where is he who has been born king of the Jews? For we saw his star in the east and have come to worship him. When Herod the king heard this, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. Why were they troubled about this? With this, you have to look into the life of Herod. Here's a history lesson. We have to understand what was going on at the time and who Herod was, why he was nervous about this. He's named Herod the Great or Herod the First. He's very diverse. He was an Edomite, which means it was a tribal people that lived south of Judea. His family had converted to Judaism. Did not mean they were Jews. They converted to the religion. He knew everything there was about being a Jew, customs, laws, and the people, but he was not a Jew. His father, his name was Antipater. He was a high-ranking official under Hyrcanus II, who was, at that time, the king and high priest of Judah. He's already born into a good family. They're way up here. His father is right under the king. So he's got a pretty privileged life. Antipater appointed Herod to be governor of Galilee. So here, nepotism. Son, you got a good job. His other son also got a good job, working in the government under Rome's power. Over time, there was revolt, and King Hyrcanus was overthrown. Since Herod was raised under this guy and had close ties, he freaks out. He goes to Rome and starts petitioning. Put him back in power. The guy deserves to be in power. What are you doing? The Senate says, you know what? You're the new king. Go back and get rid of the guy who took over with the revolt. Kill him, take over, and then you're the king. He goes back. Now he's the king. There's a siege. He beats the guy after several years. They get him out. He takes over. Now think about it. He went to Rome for his friend, the earlier king. Now he's king. What do you do about that? What do you do when you go out to eat lunch together? Oh, so you're the new king, huh? That's going to be rough. So he wants to make peace. He ends up marrying Hyrcanus' granddaughter. Problem is, Herod was already married and already had a son. Well, there's an easy way to fix that. Just banish your current wife and son. And now keep it in the family. Now he's showing this guy, hey, I'm still loyal to you. This is not my fault. We're all family here. Now we're tight. You need anything, you got me. Okay? So now he stays in their good graces. He was called a vassal king. Rome, when they conquered all the countries, each of those countries became a vassal state. Part of Rome, but each had their own way of doing things, their own customs, their own religion. They were allowed to live life the way they did, but they were under strict thumb of Rome, and they had to pay taxes to Rome, so they had to pay a bunch of money. People didn't like that idea, especially him taking over. He was a vicious man. He was paranoid. He built 2 huge structures that were like barracks to protect him in case there's revolts. He was worried people were going to try to kill him or overthrow him, just like Hyrcanus was. He had a bodyguard of 2,000 soldiers. And he had a secret police to monitor the people and what they were saying about him. He had people all over the city. What are they saying about me? Tell me what they're saying. He's a great guy. He tried to win over the Jews by building amazing things for them. He rejuvenated the Second Temple, which is Herod's temple. He built the port at Caesarea. He built the fortresses at Masada and Herodium. It brought many jobs, but to pay for that, he had to tax them to death. So he ended up taking their money, but giving them work. They liked him, but they didn't like him. They're like, this guy, you know? He's known as a madman who murdered his own family and a great many rabbis. The evil genius of the Judean nation, prepared to commit any crime in order to gratify his unbounded ambition, and the greatest builder in Jewish history. He was involved with politics his whole life, so when somebody got in the middle of this, he was worried, and he would most likely have you killed. So when the Jews didn't respect him and never approved of him, okay, when they would find out there's a king from their bloodline, the Messiah, what do you think they're going to do? They're going to revolt. He can't have that. So he's nervous. A, he wants to be on the throne. B, he can't have a revolt because Rome's going to freak out. The guy was so paranoid, he killed his wife, the second wife, and 2 sons because he thought they were plotting against him. So he's willing to do anything to keep this throne. The Jews were also nervous because they knew he was a nut. So like, Herod's upset. What do we do? So they're nervous. The warning came. He told the Magi. They did not return to Herod. He told Joseph and Mary, and they took off, and this infuriated Herod. You know what happens next? A very bad decision. It says in Matthew 2:16 that he killed all the children in Bethlehem. 2 and down. What?
Male children.
Yeah, all the male children. 2 and under. So you see a pattern here. As you look in the Word, going back to the very beginning, you'll see a pattern here that this fits. Satan was in the garden with Adam and Eve. He heard God not only punish, but he heard a prophecy against himself. One day, her seed, somebody from her family line, will crush your head. He's not going to let that happen. He's got to destroy the bloodline of Eve, and he's got to wipe out Israel because they're prophetically going to be given everything in the end. He's got two things he's trying to do. Think about the picture here. Cain killed Abel, the first murder, whispering in Cain's ear. 2, Satan's annex created giants, and that's what caused Noah's flood. God said, I got to wipe out the earth. They're all corrupt. All of these people have been corrupt by Satan's demonic plans. 3, Satan encouraged the Pharaoh to kill all the male Israelite children. Once again, all the male children. In Joshua's day, Satan once again brought giants to the land. And he knew Israel was supposed to take that land over, so why not fill it with people that would be hard to kick out and people that were already infused with the demonic blood? Satan encouraged the rebellion at Mount Sinai, which got thousands killed. The Babylonian exiles meant to kick Israel out of the land and reduce their numbers. In the book of Esther, Haman ordered all the Israelites to be killed. Several holocausts throughout the generations, not just World War II. We go all the way back 1,000 years. They were killing Jews like you have no idea. Persecuting them left and right. No other nation in the world has gone through this but them. Yet, they still rebounded. They're back in their land. They're speaking their original language. No one's done that. No one has done that. Road trip. Now, Joseph, Mary, and Jesus escape safely to Egypt. They're able to live there because of the gifts from the Magi. After a while, the angel tells them, come on back, Herod's dead. On the way back, an angel tells them, no. It's not safe, go here. Why didn't you just tell them that in the beginning? Why did the angel say, come on back? Halfway, go the other way. People are, do we say lazy? We get complacent. Things all right in Egypt. He's got money. He might even have a job by now. He's doing pretty well. He's told to come home. He needs incentive to come home. If he said, come home, but listen, there's somebody still trying to kill your son. You'd be like, okay, let me stew about this. 6 months later, I'm thinking this is still the place to stay. He needed him back. He needed him to come back and be in Nazareth, and that would be a fulfillment of prophecy. So instead of telling him the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, they said, come on back now. By the way, we need you to come over here now. So he just guided him home in a special way, because I don't think he would have come home, not knowing that. Now, the conclusion I got out of this, as I read it over and thought about it, I saw a connection to another famous character in the Bible. If you look at Genesis 12, you have a picture of Abraham. God speaks to Abraham and says, I want you to go to a place called Canaan. One day, Canaan's going to be Israel. So he says, I want you to go to Canaan. He takes a big trip. Famine makes him flee to Egypt. In Egypt, God blesses him financially. He eventually travels back to Israel. Abraham has a son in Israel and raises him there. As a test of faith, God tells Abraham to take his one and only natural son to Mount Moriah and sacrifice him there. God stopped him before going through with it and provided a sacrifice for Abraham. Now, look at Matthew 2. Joseph and Mary traveled a long distance to Jerusalem. They had to flee to Israel and travel to Egypt, or flee Israel and travel to Egypt. Due to the Magi, they had the financial resources needed for the trip and a 2-year stay in Egypt. They come back to Israel and raise their son there. One day, God will provide a sacrifice, his one and only son, on Mount Moriah, where Abraham went to sacrifice. Same guy, same place. It's all a picture of Jesus. It fits a pattern. You can go way back to say, look at the 12 tribes coming into Egypt. No food, going back to Egypt again. Then coming back and going to Israel. This is pattern God has shown us. What I see is God is greater. I see people here who trust their God and follow his instruction. I see a God who constantly provides financially and spiritually. I see a God who protects his people. I see a God who knows the future. He plans and takes care of it. Everything we need comes from God, and he's very willing to give it to us. No matter what our greatest adversary throws at us, like Satan trying to kill the kids, God's greater. So, in wrapping it up, is God greater to you? Is he your all in all? Do you rely on him for everything, for your provision, your protection, your spiritual guidance, and where you're going to go and where you're going to end up? Are you putting your faith and trust in him and letting him lead you and guide you? Or are you trusting on yourself? Are you trusting on your own past experiences, on your own wins in life? Oh, this always worked for me. I'll keep doing it again. Do we rely on ourselves or do we rely on him? That's what I'm challenging you with today. Look at this picture. See a family devoted, a family willing to follow, not having anything and going, okay, God, I'll do what you want. And then suddenly God just blesses them. Okay, I'll do what you want. He blesses them. If you are willing to let go of all that we think we're in charge of and let him lead us, you're going to see a different life. Amen? Amen.